Welcome back to Power Play. The Fed's controversial carbon price carve-out on home heating oil was aimed at Atlantic Canada, with the highest proportion of homes there using oil. The Liberals insisted it wasn't a political play, though, despite sinking fortunes out east, that the carve-out applied to anyone across the country using home heating oil. It just happens about half of the homes in the Yukon do just that. But the premier of that territory is a carbon price purist of sorts, advocating in the past against any exemptions at all. This week, Premier Ranj Pillai is in Ottawa to meet with the Prime Minister and express his, quote, disappointment. Have a listen to our interview. Hi, Premier. Pleasure to welcome you here in studio.
Vashi, thank you for having me.
I appreciate you making the time. I know that you're here and you've met with the Prime Minister. I wanted to start off and ask for some clarity on your position when it comes to exemptions to the carbon pricing scheme, because in the past you've actually advocated against those exemptions in favor of a stronger price signal. Has that position now changed?
No, we were unhappy with the way that the decision was made to have the exemption in Atlantic Canada, and we vocalized that. Look, we believe in the work that's been done around carbon pricing, and we think that that is the way forward. I mean, it may not be the most well-known opinion or favorable opinion across the country, but look, we're on the front lines of climate change, and we need to ensure that something's being done. So we had a good conversation yesterday. We voiced our concerns about how things rolled out in Atlantic Canada, but at the same time requested for a proper program for heat pumps for the Yukon. We see what's happening in Atlantic Canada, and we want to see something that's as extensive rolled out in the Yukon as well.
Okay, let me parse that apart for a second and start on the heating oil exemption. So just to be clear, when you say you're disappointed, did you not want that exemption at all? Because it does end up impacting, I think 50 to 60% of the homes in the Yukon are heated using oil. So that exemption ends up benefiting a lot of people living in Yukon quite a bit.
Yeah, it was 49% of people that are using home heating oil. So it's extensive, but you know what, we've made a commitment to deal with what's happening with climate change. We haven't seen another process. I mean, I hear it from politicians across the country, oh, we're going to use innovation, there's going to be something that comes along in the future and that's going to solve our problems. No, the problems are now, and we've seen that through floods and fire. We see that on the front lines in the Yukon, and so we have to make that commitment as a country. We believe in that, and we've been rock solid on that view. But we've seen this decision made by the federal government, and I'm focused on seeing what we can do for Yukoners going forward. They're rolling out a program that's going to support the installation of heat pumps. It's more expensive to put those in place in the Yukon, so we're asking for a bit of a richer program. We're hoping to see that in place. And we know that heat pumps can't be used 12 months of the year in the Yukon. So we want to make sure that it's still of interest for Yukoners to put them in their homes. We want to see the reliance on oil go down. But again, we're still really focused on other forms of energy production, like, we have the highest per capita uptake when it comes to solar for homes in the Yukon. And we're going to continue to look at renewable energy projects across the Yukon.
And I do have questions about that, because from what I understand, some big projects are on hold right now. But I just want to make sure, I'm still not clear. Did you advocate then for the exemption to end? Like, do you not want that exemption for home heating oil, or are you just disappointed at the fact that it did happen at all?
Yeah, look, we thought the way it rolled out, first and foremost, there was no conversation. So we saw that announcement happen. We have looked at making sure that the funds that are taken into consideration, or the funds that are taken from carbon pricing, are then reallocated out to Yukoners. We've said that all along. We've had our own system in place from the start. So what we've looked at doing is making sure that we collect those funds, we work with the federal government in a bilateral agreement, and put them back to Yukoners. And so what we've seen is Yukoners, in many cases, get more funds back in their pockets than they've paid out. So we think that the system that was put in place, that we embraced, was the right system. So when we saw this diversion from what had been put in place, we had some concerns.
So when I went to the Halifax meeting of premiers that you attended, my understanding is you were a signatory to the release, the communique from that, which asked for actually the application of those exemptions more fairly and equitably across the country. How can I reconcile that with what you just said?
Yeah, you know what, look, when we sat down with our, there was a number of things that we wanted to get behind in the communique, which is standard inside those meetings. But what we really were focused at saying is, look, we need to make sure that the process across the country doesn't have these regional exceptions. That's what I was saying. We want to make sure that the processes and the systems are put out fairly from province to province to province. And I think what you heard out of Halifax from a number of individuals was that this regional exception wasn't the way to go about things.
So they wanted more exceptions.
Yeah,
that's what they were all advocating for.
So,
they wanted extended to other sources of heating homes. Are you against that?
Yeah, again, we are very focused on the system that's in place. So we believe in the system that's in place. We believe that there shouldn't have been a regional exception. And for us, we feel that the system in place is the only one that's really dealing with what's in front of us, which is climate change.
And I certainly take that point, and
Sure.
I wondered if I could ask you, with great respect, how you know that to be the case, because the Auditor General's Office recently did an audit, the Environment and Climate Change Commissioner, of the government's climate plan, the federal government's climate plan, inclusive of the price on carbon. And what they were able to tell us was that there's actually no specific target or proof right now that the government has yet to offer as to how much it has been able to reduce emissions or how much it anticipates in the greater picture it will be able to. I know it's sometimes difficult to measure that because it's like, in the absence of it, how much more would they have gone up? But there is literally no transparency around it, to the point where an NDP premier in Manitoba, Wab Kinew, told me at that premier's meeting he needs to see more proof because he doesn't believe it's a silver bullet, and he's not convinced of the effectiveness of the program. What do you know that all the rest of the premiers don't?
No, I don't think it's that I know something that the rest of the premiers don't know. I think what I know is that Yukoners have asked us as a government to take a serious approach to climate change. And when I've looked at the different systems that either have been tabled by the federal government or others that are speaking in opposition, when I look at the systems that we've viewed in the Yukon, making sure that we put a price on carbon, a price on the polluter, is the right way to go. And making
Even the
sure
consumer versus the industry, for example?
Yeah, look, I mean,
the consumer, that's the people who are paying it on their heating oil in your territory. They were the ones saying this is an issue for us. It's a costly burden.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's important for us to be able to have other options for people to pivot and to look at other ways. I mean, look, Atlantic Canada, I'm not going to speak on behalf of Atlantic Canadians. What we're seeing in the Yukon is a bigger uptake for individuals as they go towards electric heat and baseboard heat. We've seen that in all of our build-outs. We've had extensive growth in our residential buildings, our build-out portfolio, and we've seen people move towards that. We've seen people use our programs when it comes to making sure that there's other supplements to their energy production. That's what I had touched on earlier, the biggest uptake when it comes to residential solar in the country per capita. Again, I think these are the solutions that we need to focus on. But what we said from the start was the way Canada approached this with Atlantic Canada, we didn't think it was fair. And I mean, we voiced that clearly to the PMO. And now what we're seeing is a program being put in place that gives Canadians, at least Atlantic Canadians and the North, an opportunity to not be as reliant on home heating oil. And we think that's good. But we need to make sure that the program that's put in place takes into consideration the cost of installation and the cost of the infrastructure when it comes to the Yukon.
So you're okay with the exemption now, as it does apply to people in the Yukon, but you would not have advocated for it? And on the heat pumps, because they're getting 15 grand in Atlantic Canada, right?
Exactly.
Are people in Yukon going to be able to access
No, it's
that?
25 grand, we believe. It's $25,000, we think, for full installation and purchase. But what I've seen is the federal government has made a decision in Atlantic Canada, and it's taken into consideration the North. So what I'm looking at is what are the go-forward solutions based on what's been put in front of us as a government, as a territorial government. And I see there's a program in front of us. I want to make sure, based on what's happening in Atlantic Canada, that we get a good deal for Yukoners and that we have the ability to put that infrastructure in place in the Yukon.
Did the Prime Minister assure you that that would be the case, that people in Yukon would be able to avail themselves of what people in Atlantic Canada are able to? Yeah,
look, I think the conversation was very positive yesterday when it came to making sure that we had support for this program. Our officials have been dealing with federal officials. The minister that I have responsible for that area, Minister Stryker, has been having discussions with his counterpart, Minister Wilkinson, and I think we'll see how things work out over the next couple of weeks, but I'm hoping that we can get to a place where we have a strong program and that the federal government takes into consideration the extra costs associated with the installation in the Yukon.
Okay, thank you very much, Premier. I'm going to leave it there. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much.